started getting all this pressure from outside that our songs weren't legitimate, they were lightweight, they were...
Chic wasn't just making disco, they were designing the future. Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards ran the room, built the hits, and shaped a sound that still lives in pop, funk, house, and hip-hop. But the industry, it clapped late. Way late. This is what happens when two black producers take full control in a system that only wants them in the background. The sound never faded. The credit just took its time. Rodgers and Edwards weren't just out here chasing chart clout. They were basically building musical mansions while everyone else was still sketching blueprints. Chic wasn't some random disco group. It was a full-on groove factory. And Nile and Bernard were the masterminds running the show. From the moment their songs hit the airwaves, it was obvious. These guys were playing a different game. They had this signature sound. Clean, smooth, and dangerously catchy. But the secret sauce? It followed them everywhere. You could hear their touch on everything, not just Chic. That anthem everyone danced to at weddings? Them. That Diana Ross track that still goes hard? Also them. If your song needed that extra polish to sound like money, you called Nile and Bernard.
In other words, we have a certain formula for doing what we do. However, we absolutely write and produce differently for each one.
But the music biz didn't really know what to do with them. Two black men not just making hits, but calling every shot, that rattled some cages. They weren't just laying down beats, they were running the room. Total creative control, start to finish. And the labels, they weren't ready. They wanted artists they could dress up, slap a smile on, and pitch to soccer moms. Nile and Bernard were never that. Atlantic was eating up Chic's hits. Warner was obsessed with their sound, but none of that meant they actually respected Nile and Bernard. The minute things got a little too creative, odd rhythms, long jams, songs that didn't play by pop rules, the label started getting nervous. Not because the music wasn't good, it was fire, but because the guys behind it weren't quiet about how good they were. That's when the pushback started. Label execs started poking holes in their plans. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion on what song should drop first or how the album should be mixed. Then came the messiest move of all, Diana Ross's album. Rodgers and Edwards built the whole thing from scratch. Sharp, fresh, way ahead of its time. But right before the release, the label panicked. They sent in their own team to remix it without even telling them. Stripped it down, made it more basic, just to make it easier to sell. Yeah, the album made bank. But to Nile and Bernard, it was a slap in the face. A loud reminder, you can break your back making magic, and they'll still hit override if it makes them nervous. That was the real issue. This wasn't just about clashing tastes.
And then we started getting all this pressure from outside that our songs weren't legitimate, they were lightweight, they were...
By the time the early 80s rolled around, the whole disco scene was getting dragged. And not just because people were tired of glitter and dance beats. The hate got loud. And underneath all the noise, it was about way more than music. Disco had deep roots in Black, Latinx, and queer spaces. And that made it a prime target for people who wanted things to stay comfortable. Chic, who basically helped build the genre from the ground up, got tossed in the trash right along with it. They weren't just too artsy or hard to brand anymore. They were part of something the mainstream suddenly decided was embarrassing. Disco wasn't just over, it was being wiped out. People weren't just changing the station, they were lighting records on fire. Literally. That one night in Chicago, total chaos. Some rock DJ who got canned because his station switched to disco cooked up this "let's blow up our records" promo. Thousands showed up. Things got violent. People rushed the field. It ended in flames, and the baseball game that night didn't even finish. On paper, it was just a dumb radio stunt, but the energy in that stadium, that came from something deeper. This wasn't about beats and dance floors. It was about who was finally having fun and who didn't like that. Disco wasn't just music. It was a whole world. a space where Black, Latino, and queer folks could actually breathe, dance, and exist loud without apology. The clubs were more than dance floors. They were escape plans. For a minute, it felt like the spotlight had shifted, and that shift, it made a lot of people uncomfortable. So when the backlash came, it wasn't just about sounds or style. It was about who suddenly had the mic and who wanted it snatched back. Chic was dead center when it all started to crash. Even with Good Times blowing up and laying the foundation for hip-hop, the second the word disco became the industry's new swear word, everything changed. Execs stopped picking up. Journalists stopped writing nice things. Artists they once worked with acted like they'd never met them. Rodgers said the switch-up was wild. People were acting like just saying the word disco out loud might ruin their careers. Folks who used to celebrate their sound were now dodging them like it was contagious. They were literally getting iced out of rooms they helped put on the map. The music biz did what it always does. Hopped on the trend, milked it dry, then ghosted. Disco was suddenly toxic. Labels started cutting ties. Radio stopped playing the hits. Artists were either scrambling to reinvent themselves or getting left behind. And Chic? They couldn't just switch up and pretend to be something else. Their whole identity was baked into that slick, layered sound. The same scene that shot them to the top turned around and crushed them. Disco didn't actually disappear. It just changed clothes and kept moving. It morphed into house, dance, pop, whatever. But a lot of the OGs didn't survive the fallout. Careers got clipped, influence got erased in real time. Still, the music kept doing damage. In the best way. That bass line from Good Times? It got flipped into Rapper's Delight, which basically helped birth hip-hop. Nile didn't stop either. He went on to help shape everything from pop, to funk, to rock, working with massive names and still pushing sound forward. But somehow, even as the ripple effect of their work spread everywhere, Chic wasn't getting flowers. Not really. People danced to their fingerprints without even realizing it. And before getting into the stats, it was time to talk about the real story. The guys behind the magic and the mess that came with it.
You and Bernard have been together for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, if my math is right, it's about 13 years.
And,
Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards had that kind of musical chemistry you couldn't fake. But their dynamic behind closed doors? A little messier. Together, they built Chic into a machine that cranked out some of the most unforgettable songs in the game. But just because the music sounded seamless didn't mean the partnership was smooth. They first crossed paths in New York, while hustling as session players, and right away, it was clear they were nothing alike. Nile was the big picture thinker, a cool, calculated dreamer who always had his eye on the long game. Bernard? Way more intense, clean-cut but fiery, super sharp about what he wanted, and not always up for compromise.
But I mean, on an album of 8 tunes, I feel pretty strongly about at least 7 of the tunes, So it's not like something I just do in my spare time. That's my work.
That difference in energy made magic in the studio, but it also meant there were fights, creative disagreements, business tension, power struggles. Still, one thing kept them locked in. They both loved jazz. That mutual obsession bled into everything they made, giving Chic that layered, silky sound that went way deeper than just dance floor music. They never thought of themselves as just a disco act. They were pulling from way richer ingredients. And even when they clashed, the output stayed legendary. Nile and Bernard weren't just playing the songs, they were running the whole operation. They wrote everything themselves, started their own production company, and made sure they owned all the rights. Total control. But that kind of freedom, it rubbed some people the wrong way, especially in an industry that hated letting artists steer the ship. That tension wasn't just with outsiders, though. Nile was all about strategy, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Bernard? More gut-driven, emotionally locked into the music. It made for some serious behind-the-scenes heat, but that push and pull also kept the creativity on fire. Somehow, they made it work. That friction? Let's talk numbers for a sec. Le Freak didn't just chart, it exploded. It became Atlantic's biggest selling single. Not for the year, ever. That kind of success should have had award shows tripping over themselves. But when the trophies started getting passed around, crickets. Chic shifted the whole sound of music, but the industry, it barely blinked. No Grammys, no flowers, just quiet indifference. Then years later, Nile finally started getting his shoutouts, winning awards with Daft Punk, getting called a legend, working with A-list stars like Beyoncé. Suddenly, everyone remembered he existed. All well and good, but also kinda shady. Why'd he have to switch genres, team up with EDM bros, and wait decades just to get a nod from the same people who ignored him when it actually mattered? That's the part nobody likes to say out loud. The game doesn't clap for you when you're actually changing it. It waits, and sometimes it waits too long. Chic didn't just get caught in disco's downfall. They were part of a bigger pattern. The industry's habit of loving the sound but ghosting the people behind it, especially when those people were black and bold about it. Still, their influence never dipped. Go to any party, scroll any retro playlist, hit shuffle on a dance set, what's playing? Not whatever won awards back then. It's Chic. Their bass lines, sampled to death. Their tracks, still getting flipped, remixed, covered. Their style, baked into pop, funk, house, hip-hop, everything. They might have been pushed to the sidelines, but their fingerprints never left. The system tried to move on, but the foundation was already set. And that blueprint, it was always theirs.